My name is Conor Wickham. My title of my research is creating an interactive e-learning resource to enable adult learners to conduct reflective practice through the process of making art, specifically through the process of making visual art. Just a little bit about myself, my context. I'm an art and design teacher. I work in adult further education. I've been in my current position for about 4 years. I've been teaching for about 8 years, and then prior to that I was a practicing artist. So just a little bit as well about my students. I don't know if people know much about adult further education, but there's kind of 3 main reasons why adults come back to education. The first really is to find employment at the end of it. The second is to move on to higher education. And then the last generally is just to give structure and meaning to their day. So I'm just going to talk a small bit about my rationale for actually conducting the research. So the first reason really is to enable effective facilitation of reflective practice through a blended teaching approach. So at the moment within the centre we facilitate QQI certification, and a lot of the modules have an element of reflection. But a lot of the time we don't really have time to properly facilitate reflection within the classroom. So in many ways we're asking students to reflect without, enabling them to reflect. They don't really have a full understanding of it before they start. So the resource really aims to bridge that gap. It aims to provide a resource for teachers to use to inform students how to reflect, and also so students can actually bring the resource home and discover reflection themselves, as opposed to just relying on the teacher to hand them the information. The second is to provide students with an alternative language through which to reflect. That's the visual arts. So again, many of our students who return to education, they don't necessarily feel comfortable articulating their reflections and their feelings in a written format. So visual arts enables a lot of students to actually indirectly articulate what they're actually feeling with the use of visual metaphors and symbolism through colours, shapes. So it's an alternative language. And then last was really to improve my own practice and to align it to my values of creativity and autonomy. So when I began the Masters, I began using my own reflective journals. And within the journals, I kind of discovered that I wasn't, within my context, I wasn't really living my values of creativity and autonomy. So that was a major concern. I really need to realign my professional practice with my core values. Okay, so just before we move on, I'm just going to give a quick definition of what is reflective practice, because I'm aware some of you might not, some of you might be familiar, some other people might not be. So it's the process of learning through and from experience in order to gain new insights of self, practice, and society. And it involves describing, analysing, and evaluating thoughts, beliefs, assumptions, and actions. Okay? So that kind of leads me on to my literature review, which was my second chapter, where I focused on 3 main themes. The first being, like I just done, defining reflective practice, and then exploring the positives and the negatives thereof. So there's a few thinkers there which I kind of relied on there, like Sean, Dewey, Mesereau, Frere. The second was art as a form of reflective practice. So again, it was looking at positive examples of how art was used to facilitate reflective practice and the advantages of art over written reflections. The language of art, so I kind of touched upon this, the use of metaphor and symbolism. And then also the challenges of visual art as well, because again, not many students, they find it difficult to express, and then they can also find it extremely difficult to express as a, the process of making art as well. It's an added challenge. The last theme I looked at then was technology and reflective practice, and how technology really has been used or is being used to facilitate reflective practice. And primarily what I found is that technology has kind of been used to, well, it's been used as similar to a book method to present it, but also to maybe just record reflective practice through like audio, visual, logs. But there really isn't any resources out there which really facilitate reflective practice, any interactive resources which inform and engage the students. And there certainly wasn't any out there which relate to art and reflective practice. So I felt I needed to have a look at some instructional design models as well because of the lack of research out there. So I looked at specifically at Jack Coomey's instructional design model, it's a model to facilitate the creation of multimedia artifacts, not specifically a reflective practice, but I had to pick one to kind of go with. So, unless I pick it and kind of explore it and give it a go, I'm not really going to find out if it actually works or not. So after the lit review, I kind of moved into my methodology. So again, similar to Catherine, I use the educational entrepreneurial approach to action research, and for much of the same reasons Catherine kind of posed. Core one for me was the creation of an artifact. So a key component of the method or the approach was the researcher needs to create an artifact, and that's part of the research process. So that was really, really important for me, and again, that aligned with my values of creativity and also autonomy. So I'm going to have a look now kind of at the stages within the approach. The first one being the explore stage. So within the explore stage, again, I went back to my reflective journals, and that's really where I found out and explored my values and passions and discovered really that my professional context and my values weren't really aligned, and really that my values were actually, well, not all of them, but those two particular ones were really aspirations within my professional context. I looked at my professional context where I'm working, the Adult Further Education Centre. So I had to ask a few questions like, was the centre actually ready for e-learning? Was there anybody in the centre who were actually going to help me facilitate the change? And also and probably the most important thing, was there any point to actually this artifact? What was the purpose of it? Was it actually going to help? Which were all positive answers, thankfully. And then I had to look at the most appropriate e-learning technology as well. So that led me on to Articulate. Articulate storyline, which we'll look at in a little bit. Okay, next stage is the understand stage. So the understand stage, I had to understand obviously a few things to move forward. The first one was the literature, so the likes of Donald Shawn. I had to understand what the hell John Dewey was talking about for about half a year, and that enabled me to understand Measro and Green. I needed to understand my own artistic context. The amount of time this was going to take. It was going to take a full year. That meant no fun. That meant hours slogging in front of a computer. I've included some penguins here as well. So this represents collaboration. So during the winter, penguins need to all group together to survive, and that's very much what happened over the last couple of years. I had to really depend upon colleagues here, supervisors, friends, family. And then again, I needed to really understand the methodology and also the software before I actually started creating, because there was no point creating if I didn't really understand what the software could do. Which leads me on to the artifact. So we are going to just take a small little look at the artifact, and I'll talk you through some of the features. So it begins with kind of this nice, relaxing introduction, where students are asked to kind of enter their name. So it kind of engages them and it settles them for the learning that's going to happen. So we go straight into a navigation guide, and then also course content. So before we actually really get into anything, students know exactly what's kind of ahead of them. Now I've broken down the course or the resource into 4 sections. The first one is what is art? Art is reflective practice, values, and then, the last one's art is reflective practice. But it's moving a bit too quick for me. This is the first section, what is art? So every section starts off with learning outcomes. So this section I've really turned into a repository for art history and visual art, because I'm aware a lot of my students aren't going to be that comfortable with art. They're not really going to have that much knowledge. So it's a place for them to kind of discover art. We range from the very first one is 30,000 BC with cave paintings all the way up to modern art. So there's links within each of these kind of resources as well, which take them to websites. So for example, the Boston Museum, which will give additional information. There's also links to other websites like obviously Wikipedia, Khan Academy, which again, it's kind of like I said, an anchor for students to actually branch out onto the web, because otherwise it becomes very difficult to find your own kind of meaning or to actually find resources or ideas. There's a few navigational features like the menu, some of the resources, there's a glossary, reflective journal as well, so if students still choose to actually do written reflections throughout it, which is absolutely perfect, they can, this is great. And then there's also a section which linked to some art activities online. So again, if students need a break from the reading, they can go and they can just kind of create. So these art activities kind of pop up throughout the course. So this one is kind of a silk painter, which is kind of nice. So again, there's a good mix of different kind of activities. It's free, it's good. Okay, so we're going to have a look at just 2 of the other sections. So the first one is reflective practice. So it gives a brief history of reflective practice. It looks at some of the thinkers like Dewey, Kant, Shawn, Socrates. and it's got a few little interactive little animations, again, just to engage them, because that was one thing that some of the students commented upon when they were using it. They were almost looking forward to what the next slide was going to look like instead of just trudging through the content. Reflective practice models as well. So this is for some of the teachers within the centre. You know, each of them apply kind of different models. So it's kind of aimed at kind of covering all bases as well. And some of the models are going to appeal to some of the students. Some of them are going to need more simplistic kind of approaches. And here I kind of introduced the idea of how we reflect. So like I said, most of the students reflect through journaling, but again, there's visual art, there's music. It's a journaling one. There's video as well. So this is a video that we made last year on lino block printing. So again, it's starting to introduce the idea of other forms of reflection. And back to the menu screen. So the students can always get back to the menu screen just up in the top left-hand corner. And then the last section is on values. And again, this is where students are asked to actually question their own beliefs and assumptions, because you really, from my experience and from the literature as well, you can't really conduct reflective practice if you don't really know who you are. You know, you're always kind of separate from the experience. And then again, just more information on values and links and stuff. But that's only a small little taster of it. You have to actually go on to properly get a feel for it. And just to briefly kind of talk through the create stage. So it began with sketching, similar to Catherine's, mind mapping, which turned into creating, which turned into validation meetings or online forums or conversations. So there were suggestions made about what I can do to improve it or what I need to take out. And then we went back to this stage, to this stage, and this stage. So it's a kind of continuous cycle pretty much up until now. And then the last stage is the transform stage. So here we're asked to actually look at the whole research and go, well, what happened there? Was there any actually personal transformation at all? So again, for myself, there was improved confidence and skills, and confidence with being able to create my own interactive content, the skills in that as well, and the confidence to actually, you know, initiate change. There's making an impact upon my context. So before we started, we were a little bit in the Stone Age. We had computers, we used computers, but we didn't really create and teach through them. The attainment of knowledge and deeper understanding myself. So again, my reflective journals have really enabled me to understand who I am and, you know, where I want to go, and what kind of future I want to create for myself. And then obviously to becoming an educational entrepreneur. So I'm creating my own, you know, classroom context. I'm identifying my own problems, and I'm creating my own solutions with a hope to actually spreading ideas to other people. So that's kind of it. Just many thanks just to Yvonne and Margaret for 2 years of patience, which has been great, and then to all my classmates and colleagues and all that kind of stuff. So thanks very much.